Good to have you still with us here on Breakfast Central. The recent coup in Niger Republic has once again highlighted the fading rays of democracy in Africa and the foreshadows a complex tragedy of democratization in the continent. The coup orchestrated on Wednesday, July 26, not only poses uncertainty for the country's 25 million inhabitants, but it also deeply undermines strategic investments made by different stakeholders in their quest to silence the guns on the continent, especially in the Sahel.
Since the insurrection, the military has suspended the country's constitution, closed borders with neighboring nations, imposed a curfew, and suspended all institutions of the republic. Leader of the Presidential Guard, General Omar Tiani, has been announced as the new head of government. The international community has responded with widespread condemnation, with ECOWAS, the African Union, and United Nations all denouncing the military's actions. Chris Ayanwu is the Executive Director of Global Advocacy for African Affairs, and he joins us this morning to assess the diplomatic implications of this development in Niger. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Mr. Ayanwu.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right. We've been following up with the story happening in Niger, and like we said in the introduction of this conversation, that we're starting to see that it's affecting the fabrics of democracy. There's been reactions globally. Yesterday, the news was agog with, the internet was filled with information and reactions to the U.S. Secretary of State, or the acting Deputy Secretary of State visiting Niger, and of course, there not being any headway. So I'd like us to talk about, first of all, what this is or what this means for Africa's democracy, or democracy as a system of government in Africa.
Well, it means a lot. First of all, everybody's worried. Coups and counter-coups in Africa, especially in West Africa and some parts of Central Africa, has become a very serious concern. In the last, since 2020, I think there have been about 7 coups on the whole, successful coups on the whole. There are more attempts, and then it's a very big one. It's a very big concern. And recently, the coup in Niger, it's much more a bigger concern, because if you consider the large deposit of uranium and oil in Niger, and then the Niger strategic position, when you look at the ongoing war against Islamic rebels in the Sahel region and all that. So it's a serious concern for EU, for US, for Russia, and even China. And so it's not something that Africans and African leaders, the regional bodies, ECOWAS and AU should, gloss about, because Niger actually occupies a very strategic position, right now. And then if you also look at, I think on Thursday last week, the juntas announced the withdrawal of their troops, who are helping in the fight against insurgency, at the northern part of the country and all that. So it's a very big concern. But then for me, I think what the focus should really be is, number one, what is actually the cause of all these coups? So as long as bad governance persists in Africa, poverty, poor economic performance, election rigging, falsification, fraudulent announcement of election results, and all manner of attributes of bad governance persists in Africa, coup must continue to happen. So I think the concentration should be, you don't chase shadows, you don't attack the symptoms, you go right to the cause of the problem. So the regional body should begin to sit down and continue to have genuine and sincere conversations on why these coups. Is one too many? And the conversation should borders about how do we begin to deliver good governance. You see, there has been this dilemma, this conversation about democracy and development. Some will say development is the flavor of democracy. Others will argue, no, there are two different things. After all, China is not democracy. But the thing is that when you are going into develop democracy, you are also signing for development. And once these things are not in place, then you are inviting coups, for yourself and for your country. Most times when these coups happen in Africa, the reason is usually we are coming to fight corruption, we are coming to end bad governance and all that. So if coups are old-fashioned, if you look at the Americas and some part of Europe, nobody hears about all these things. Because why? The citizens are being prioritized. Citizens' welfare are being prioritized. People know that they are in government staff.
Well,
in Africa, nobody
Yeah, I mean, but there could be a different argument with that. You know, it could be because they've also figured out ways that they can hold on to power, you know, maintain power, overthrow governments without doing it in a military way. That's why you might say that coups are, you know, outdated, because there are still, you know, governments being overthrown across the world by certain
Yeah, it's
persons.
exactly my point. I think we're saying the same thing. You see, yeah, people, when government is not performing at the end of the term of 4 years or wherever, or whenever, you are sure you have the power to remove this government. But in Africa, that's not the issue.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
that's exactly what I'm trying to say, Mr. Anyanwu, that the idea that you have the power to remove a government after 4 years has also fallen flat on its face, because we've seen a lot of these African countries that have people adjust, you know, their constitution after they've served 2 terms and eventually, you know, become presidents for life. And we see, you know, France and the West supporting these same people, keeping them in power, giving them every type of support to keep them in power and break whatever idea of democracy that the citizens felt that they had in the first place. So that has also fallen flat on its face. The idea of, oh, after 4 years you can change him, it doesn't work like that anymore. So people don't have that level of, you know, trust in a democratic system of government. We probably also need to get to a place where we understand that not everybody has to, you know, live in a democracy. You mentioned China just now. Countries will thrive the way that they will thrive. But I want to talk about ECOWAS and, you know, the seeming dishonesty with ECOWAS as a body, you know, where it has turned, you know, its face, you know, the other way when citizens and democratic institutions were being bastardized in different countries. But of course now seem to have a really, really loud voice. Share your thoughts on the current ECOWAS efforts with the current ECOWAS chairman.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. You see, you know, remember I mentioned the strategic position Niger occupied right now. You know, so seeing ECOWAS rising and trying to take the position they are taking at the moment is actually not surprising. But the thing is this: I've always argued in the past that look, most of these regional bodies, be it ECOWAS, be it, you know, whatever, are just like toothless bulldog. And of course, you don't even build any legitimate thing on the wrong foundation. You just start by tracing how these leaders, how do they emerge? We have the present leadership of ECOWAS right now, whose own election is being contested in the law court, and who a lot of people believe there is no legitimacy yet. So some of these things is where you know, is just where your interest is. But again, I think it's time we begin to look at how do we begin to reinforce some of these regional bodies. In any case, I don't even see, you see the last time in the last hunger in New York, where DRC and Rwanda went to wash their dirty linen in the public, where I prefer to, you know, and call it. They also have their own regional bodies, and their own regional bodies couldn't address the problem they're having. So this has always been the case. I think the concentration should be, how do we begin to, you know, solidify, build a stronger foundation around these regional bodies, such that, you know, when they are out to take a decision, you know, the decision is final, the decision stands, and the decision can begin to address some of those things. But of course, you know, most of these things are founded on political expediencies, and then at the end of the day, it still goes, you know, the way it has always gone in the past and all that. My concern really about all these coups, really, and I like to go back to that first point. There is no time. African leaders must begin to sit up, to begin to ask the correct questions. Coups will continue to happen in Africa, especially in these small African countries. You know, and you said something about, you know, the role of you know, the international bodies, the West and all that in some of these. Yes, they will continue to play those roles, because I mean, in Africa, everybody is trying to grab what he can grab in Africa. In the 8 years of Obama, you know, a man that has his root from Africa, he spearheaded over 7 different, you know, sit-tight leaders who had their way. He was shaking hands. He was so, you know. So they will continue to do this. They will continue to do this. They're not even interested. So it is time for Africans to begin to, you know, address their problems, involve local participants on how we can begin to address our problems ourselves. Because these people are not here to help anybody. They are just here for their own personal interest, and they will continue to spearhead over some of these things. You see the role France has been playing in most of these francophone countries. You think France will want to? So some of those things it's just waste of time. African leaders should genuinely sit down. I like the kind of African leaders that I imagine right now. In the last few years, we've seen a Ruto who has been very, very firm in his position on the need for Africa to rise beyond age and all that. We have to see more of those conversations, even if they don't mean it. At least let the world know that, look, we are beginning to see a different mindset. We are beginning to see people taking different direction from what has been the former. So when we continue that way, I think most of these things, some of these people start losing interest in what they are doing right now. Use, does not pay anyone. In Nigeria, if ECOWAS move into Niger tomorrow, it's still the same people that have continued to fight over the years that will suffer again. There will be displacement of millions of Nigerians. There will be death, on the part of the casualties on the part of the civilians.
And not just Nigerians, to be honest, Nigerians as well, because we find that we have lots of Nigerians who are also living in Nigeria and lots of Nigerians in Nigeria,
Exactly.
in different parts of we are mixed, we're intermixed. But I'd like us to talk about, what's your projection for how all this is going to play out, right? It's been I think over a week since the coup happened successfully. What we've unfortunately seen is there have been threats and counter threats. ECOWAS has threatened to use military intervention. The chairman of ECOWAS and president of Nigeria has been heavily criticized by people of Nigeria and those are outside Nigeria as well, and even the Nigerians for the potential decision to use military force. Mali has also warned that the ECOWAS should not use military force because they're standing firmly behind them. Even Simon Ekpa has weighed in on the conversation and said that if Nigeria chooses to intervene with military, they should be so that we should be rest assured that we have Biafrans who are in support of this. There have been several reactions. I want to find out what's your take on how this is eventually going to play out and what this will mean for democracy and maybe coups in Africa.
I don't think the approach ECOWAS is taking right now is necessary, at least for now. I think they should continue to dialogue. And as a matter of fact, just like you noted, Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea, they have all given their support to the juntas, to Abdurrahmani, and I mean, this is not going to do. At the end of the day, still the people that have been suffering they may not achieve much. So I think they have to continue to dialogue and see and concentrate on how to douse the tension and have things moving. Start moving on in Niger again. But the thing is this: ECOWAS should devote more time in investing in intelligence. Nobody plans a coup in a day. You don't plan a coup in a week. So all this take time. So where is ECOWAS? Where are the intelligence? So these are the things, the conversations they should begin to have, and not just being reactive. The leadership of ECOWAS or any other regional body in Africa should begin to invest in intelligence. Look, in as much as there is bad governance, there is poverty, there is people's mandates at the poll are continue to be changed. There will continue to be coup in Africa. So they have to invest on intelligence. How do we forestall this even before it happens? And all that. Coming to tell us you're going to carry out military interventions in Niger and all that, for me, that's an afterthought, because at the end of the day, I don't even know what you intend to achieve. The continent is already in turmoil. And we don't need someone, and particularly in that particular region. We don't need all these things. We need a calm, we need a peaceful Africa.
I agree with that. Yeah.
They will have to send delegations, even front powers, and assemble defense chiefs of different countries. Africans are beyond that. When Russia went into war, thinking in a few days, Ukraine would have been, storied in the past. What is happening today? So all these things, war does not pay anyone. So then we have to continue to dialogue. Then we have to continue to look at the things that continue to give rise to these coups. And I believe being proactive will help rather than stress of war and all manner of things End of the day.
I agree that there's so much that needs to be worked on, that and also needs to be changed with regards to narrative concerning Africa. ECOWAS as a body also needs to become more sincere and more honest with itself, and with and the reason it was set up in the first place. But we of course will continue to encourage a diplomatic solution to the issues in Niger, and remind our African presidents that we should not fight the wars of any other person. We should not, of course, let our lands also be used to, fight the wars of another person or another country. Mr. Anyanwu, it's a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for joining us this morning. We'll be speaking with you again, hopefully.
You're welcome. Thank you.